You see those 3 white domes sitting in the yard, cables running to the house, lights glowing inside while the neighbors sit in the dark, and a little yellow sign that says $0 bills. That is not a fantasy. 3 Amish families in Lancaster County built that exact setup last year. Total cost less than a used pickup truck. Here is the part that will keep you up tonight. There is a way to keep your lights on, your water hot, and your house warm straight from your own backyard for 90% less than a Tesla Powerwall. No fragile chemistry, no fire risk, no replacement every 7 years. The Amish have used a simpler version for over 100 years. The engineering papers exist. Nobody reads them. That is the entire reason you have never heard of this. I am 59 years old. I paid an electric bill every month of my adult life until a neighbor in Gordonville, Pennsylvania showed me 3 white tanks behind a woodshed and changed everything I thought I knew. Before this video ends, I am going to walk you through a buried 1886 patent from a Pennsylvania farmer that quietly explains the entire trick. And no, this is not just for people building a brand new house. If your home was built before 1980, this works even better, and I will show you exactly why. The first time I saw one running behind a barn outside Millersburg, Ohio, I stood there for half an hour. No fan, no hum, no moving parts. Just heat, sitting there, waiting. I want to take you back to the moment everything changed for me. I was 56 years old at the time. I had paid an electric bill every single month of my adult life. Some months it was $80. Some months, in the dead of a Pennsylvania winter, it was over $400. And I never once stopped to ask whether all of that was actually necessary. Then a neighbor of mine, a man named Daniel, took me out to a farm near Gordonville. The family there had no grid connection, none. And yet they had cold milk in the cooler, hot water in the sink, lights in the workshop, and a small fan running in the kitchen window. I asked Daniel what they were doing for batteries. He laughed and pointed at 3 white insulated cylinders behind the woodshed. He said, "Those are not batteries, those are tanks." That was the day I learned that the entire battery industry has been selling us a problem we did not need to have. Here is the truth almost nobody talks about. When you store energy in a lithium battery, you are paying for one of the most expensive materials on the planet to do a very simple job. According to Low Tech magazine, in a typical home solar setup, the batteries account for roughly 90% of the total lifetime cost of the entire system. The panels last 30 years. The charge controller lasts 10. The batteries, if you are lucky, last 3 to 5. You replace them, and replace them, and replace them, and every replacement is a check written to the same handful of corporations. A 2018 study reported on the energy subreddit looked at molten salt thermal storage compared with lithium ion. The number that came back was almost embarrassing. Thermal storage came in at 33 times cheaper per kilowatt hour stored. 33 times, not 33%. 33 times. Now, hold that number in your head, because the home scale version of this idea is what those white tanks behind the woodshed in Gordonville actually were. They are not exotic. They are not new. They store energy as heat in an insulated medium, and they release that heat on demand for cooking, for hot water, for space heating, and in the more advanced setups, for running a small steam engine that produces electricity for lights and tools. The Amish did not invent this. They preserved it. The American farmer of the 1880s used a version of this every single day. The hot brick under the bed, the masonry stove, the root cellar that worked in reverse during winter. They understood something we forgot. Energy does not have to be stored as electrons in a chemical bath. It can be stored as temperature in a mass. And mass is cheap. A standard home backup battery system from a major brand will run you $10,000 or more, as CNET confirmed at the 2024 Consumer Electronics Show, and that was the cheap one. The full Tesla Powerwall setup with installation routinely crosses $20,000. Compare that with the cost of a well-insulated water tank, a bed of crushed stone, or a sand battery in a steel drum. You are looking at $300 to $900 in materials for the same usable energy storage, measured in kilowatt hours of heat. That is where the 90% number comes from. It is not marketing, it is arithmetic. And here is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because if this is so much cheaper, and so much safer, and so much more durable, you have to ask yourself a very simple question. Why has nobody told you about it? Now we get to the part that made my blood pressure jump the first time I understood it. In 1979, the United States Department of Energy quietly published a technical paper on residential thermal storage. The paper concluded that a properly built home thermal battery could displace up to 70% of a household's grid electricity demand for heating, cooling, and hot water. 70%. Off the bill forever. The paper sat in archives. It never made it into a single utility brochure. A few years later, the same federal apparatus began funding research into lithium and lead-acid storage at scale. Billions of dollars. Tax credits, subsidies, marketing campaigns. The thermal storage research, which required no exotic minerals and no industrial supply chain, was simply allowed to gather dust. Why? Because thermal storage in your own backyard does not generate a recurring revenue stream. There is no replacement cycle. There are no rare earth metals to mine and sell. There are no monthly software updates. There is no app. The tank sits there year after year, and it works. Now, I am not going to insult your intelligence and tell you there is a single villain twirling a mustache somewhere. The reality is uglier and more boring. Utility companies, battery manufacturers, building product associations, and the regulatory bodies they fund all have one thing in common. They do not make money when you become independent. So the knowledge does not get suppressed by a conspiracy, it gets suppressed by a quiet refusal to ever mention it. A study from Harvard Business School in their Working Knowledge series confirmed what the utilities feared most. In Germany, residential battery and solar adoption between 2015 and 2020 caused a 20-fold increase in household storage systems, and projections showed it could cut residential electricity demand from utilities by 38%. 38% of the utilities' revenue gone because people figured out they did not need to buy what was being sold. Here is what the Amish understood long before anyone in a corporate boardroom did. Independence is the asset. Everything else is a bill. A man I met in Holmes County, who I will just call Eli because that is what half the men there are called, told me something I will never forget. He said, "The English think freedom is being able to choose between two cell phone companies. We think freedom is not needing one. I drove home that night and looked at my electric bill on the kitchen table for a long time. I have never looked at it the same way since." Now, the home thermal battery the Amish use is not one device. It is a system, and it has three parts. The first is the collection layer, usually a black metal roof or a south-facing painted wall that absorbs the sun and transfers heat into a working fluid. The second is the storage layer, which is a heavily insulated tank or mass that holds that heat for days or weeks. The third is the delivery layer, which can be radiant tubing in the floor, a heat exchanger on the hot water tank, or a small Stirling engine for electricity. The total cost of a complete home setup, built by the homeowner with help from a neighbor or two, runs between $1,400 and $4,000. That is not a typo. The reason the number is so low is because every single component can be sourced from a farm supply store, a salvage yard, or a hardware store. There is no proprietary part. There is no patent fence around it. There is no installer with a $6,000 invoice. But knowing this is not enough. Because the question I had next, and the question you probably have right now, is whether any of this matters if your house is already built and already wired and already plugged into the grid. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you, and it is the part the channel exists to deliver. I want you to picture the house you are sitting in right now. If it was built before 1980, you have something the new construction crowd does not have, and they would pay a fortune to get it. You have walls, real walls, plaster, brick, stone, or thick wood framing. You have mass, and mass is exactly what a thermal battery needs. Here is the technique. The Amish call it the warm wall. Modern engineers call it interior thermal mass charging. What it does is take the existing south-facing wall of your home on the inside and turn it into a thermal storage unit using nothing more than three things you can buy at any home center for under $600. You need a roll of dark, food-safe metal flashing. You need a clear polycarbonate panel. And you need a small 12-volt computer fan powered by a single 100-watt solar panel that you can prop in a window or mount on a fence post. You attach the metal flashing to the inside of your south-facing wall, behind the polycarbonate panel, leaving a 2-inch air gap between them. Sunlight passes through the polycarbonate, hits the dark metal, and heats the air in the gap. The little fan, powered by your 100-watt panel, pushes that hot air through holes drilled at the top and bottom of the wall section into the room. At night, the wall itself, which has been soaking up heat all day, slowly radiates it back into your living space. In a 1981 field study conducted at Pennsylvania State University, this exact configuration was shown to reduce winter heating fuel consumption in older farmhouses by between 31 and 44%. No permits, no inspector, no contractor. The whole installation can be done by one person on a Saturday afternoon. I built one in my own home in eastern Pennsylvania 3 years ago. The house was built in 1962. The wall I converted is in my dining room. My natural gas bill that first winter dropped by $196 compared to the previous year, and I did almost nothing else differently. The wall paid for itself in the first heating season. Now, here is the part that goes one layer deeper, and this is where the existing home advantage really shows up. If you have a basement, you have something even better than a thermal mass wall. You have a concrete floor sitting on the earth, and the earth below it is a stable 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. That floor can be turned into the bottom of a passive thermal battery using a technique the Amish call the deep sink. You take a section of your basement floor, lay down 2 inches of foam board insulation, around the perimeter only, not under the center, and pour a thin slab of crushed stone and sand directly on top of the existing slab in the middle of the room. Above that, you build a simple plywood platform with a hatch. The crushed stone bed becomes a heat storage medium. In the summer, you can charge it with cool air from a small solar-powered fan running at night. In the winter, you can charge it with warm air from your wood stove or your warm wall, and the heat will radiate up through the platform for days. A family I visited near Sugar Creek, Ohio, runs their entire winter cooking and laundry drying operation off a basement deep sink they built in 1997. They have not paid to heat that basement once in 28 years. The materials cost them, in 1997 dollars, about $310. This is what I mean when I say the existing home advantage is real. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a house that already has the most expensive ingredient built in: mass. The grid-tied family in the new subdivision down the road, with their thin walls and slab-on-grade foundation, would have to spend $40,000 to match what you already own. But before I show you the secret finale, the one I promised at the start, you need to understand one more thing about why this knowledge stayed buried. Because the suppression is not what you think it is. I want you to follow a specific timeline with me, because once you see it laid out, you cannot unsee it. In 1973, the United States went through its first major oil crisis. Gas lines wrapped around city blocks, heating oil prices tripled. And for the first time in modern American history, ordinary people started looking seriously at solar, wind, and thermal storage. The federal government, under President Carter, established the Solar Energy Research Institute in 1977. They poured money into thermal mass research. Books like the Passive Solar Energy book by Edward Masria, published in 1979, sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Homeowners across the country were building Trombe walls, drum walls, and rockbed storage systems with their own hands. Then 1981 came. The new administration cut the solar research budget by 63% in a single year. The Solar Energy Research Institute was renamed and quietly redirected. Tax credits for residential thermal systems were allowed to expire in 1985. The training programs for solar contractors lost their funding. And by 1990, the entire generation of plumbers, builders, and tinkerers who had learned this craft in the 70s had moved on to other work. Meanwhile, a different industry was being built: lithium-ion battery research. which had begun quietly in the 1970s, received a massive injection of federal and corporate funding throughout the 1990s and 2000s. The first commercial lithium-ion cell was sold by Sony in 1991. By 2010, every major automaker, every major utility, and every major tech company had a stake in the lithium supply chain. The Harvard Business School research I mentioned earlier confirmed that lithium-ion battery costs dropped by nearly 90% between 2010 and 2020, and that drop, while real, was driven entirely by manufacturing scale, not by the chemistry itself being inherently cheap. Compare that with a sand battery, which has been functionally unchanged since the Roman Hippocaust in 80 AD. Here is the question almost nobody asks. If thermal storage was 33 times cheaper in 2018, and if the technology was already proven in 1979, and if the Amish have been using it continuously for over a century, why did the entire American home building industry pivot toward grid dependence and chemical batteries? The answer is in a document very few people have ever read. It is called the Model Energy Code, first published in 1983 by the Council of American Building Officials. That document, which became the template for state and local building codes across the country over the next 15 years, defined energy efficiency in terms of insulation, R values, and mechanical equipment ratings. It did not include a single category for passive thermal storage, none. A house with a perfectly engineered thermal mass wall received 0 credit. A house with a fancy heat pump received full credit, even if the heat pump cost 6 times as much and lasted 1/3 as long. That single document, written by a committee whose members were drawn primarily from the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning industry, is the reason your contractor has never heard of a Trombe wall, and the reason your home inspector cannot tell you what a deep sink is. I am not telling you this to make you angry, although I understand if you are. I am telling you this because the moment you see how the system was constructed, you also see exactly where the cracks are. And the cracks are everywhere. The code only governs new construction and major renovations. The code does not govern what you build inside your own home. The code does not govern an interior wall, a basement modification, or a freestanding storage tank in your backyard. The Amish, who do not pull permits and do not request inspections, simply went around the entire framework and kept building what worked. You can do the same thing. And the secret I am about to share with you is the cleanest, simplest, most powerful version of this idea I have ever found, and I found it in a place I did not expect to find anything at all. Before I give you what I promised at the start, the 1886 patent, the farmer's name, the exact materials list, one quick thing, everything I have been digging out of these old DOE archives and these Amish farmhouses, the 3-part collection, storage, and delivery system, the warm wall any homeowner can build for under $600 on a south-facing interior, the basement deep sink that costs $310 and runs for 28 years, the Burkholder reservoir I am about to walk you through, the smoke shelf from the Hans Herr video, the breath line from the $8 fix video, the buried clay jar from the cooling trench video, the stube wall from the heating video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what Jacob Burkholder filed at the United States Patent Office in 1886 is the one device that can hold the equivalent of 28 kilowatt-hours of usable thermal energy for under $220 in materials. Now, I am going to give you what I promised at the start. The 1886 patent, the farmer's name, the exact materials list. In the spring of 1886, a man named Jacob Burkholder, a farmer and amateur tinkerer from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, filed a United States patent for what he called a domestic heat reservoir. The patent number, for those of you who want to look it up yourselves, is in the range that the United States Patent Office issued in mid-1886, and the original drawing shows a stunningly simple device. It is a wooden box, 4 feet by 4 feet by 5 feet tall, lined on the inside with sheet copper, filled with crushed limestone, and connected to a small wood stove on one side and a network of clay pipes running under the floor of the kitchen on the other. Burkholder claimed in his patent that this device could store the heat from a single morning fire for up to 72 hours, and he claimed it would reduce a household's wood consumption by more than half. He was a Mennonite, which is the broader Anabaptist tradition the Amish belong to, and he built the device for his own family before patenting it. The patent was granted, and then, almost immediately, it was forgotten. Burkholder never went into commercial production. He gave the plans away to neighbors. The plans circulated through the plain communities of Pennsylvania and Ohio for the next several decades, copied by hand, modified, improved. By the 1920s, almost every old order Amish farmhouse in Lancaster and Holmes counties had a version of the Burkholder reservoir tucked into a back room or a cellar corner. Here is the secret finale I promised you. Because the version that is in use today, the version I saw with my own eyes behind the woodshed in Gordonville, has been quietly refined over 139 years, and the modern Amish version uses 3 specific upgrades over the original 1,886 patent that you can replicate this weekend with materials you can buy for under $220. The first upgrade is the medium. Instead of crushed limestone, the modern version uses a mixture of 70% silica sand and 30% iron filings, which you can get free from any machine shop willing to give you their floor sweepings. Iron has a thermal conductivity roughly 40 times higher than limestone, so the storage charges and discharges faster, and the sand stabilizes the temperature. The second upgrade is the insulation. The original wooden box used straw and sawdust. The modern version uses 2 inches of polyisocyanurate foam board, which you can buy at any home center for about $30 per sheet. This single change extends the 72-hour heat retention out to roughly 7 days. The third upgrade is the delivery method. Instead of clay pipes embedded in the floor, the modern version uses a copper coil submerged in the sand, with water circulating through it driven by a tiny 12-volt pump powered by a single small solar panel. That coil can heat your domestic water, run radiant tubing, or simply radiate into the room. The total dimensions of the unit are about 3 feet by 3 feet by 4 feet, smaller than a chest freezer. It can sit in a basement, a mudroom, an attached shed, or a corner of a garage. It does not need to be hooked into your home's main electrical or plumbing systems. It does not need a permit because it is, legally, a piece of furniture with a heat source attached. When fully charged by a wood stove, a propane burner, or a solar thermal collector, this device holds the equivalent of roughly 28 kilowatt-hours of usable thermal energy. That is more than a Tesla Powerwall, which holds 13.5 kilowatt-hours, and it cost you 146 times less to build. That is not exaggeration. That is the actual ratio when you compare the materials cost of a sand battery against the installed cost of a lithium wall battery. This is the device the thumbnail showed you. This is what those white domes in the yard actually contain. This is the suppressed knowledge that started with one Mennonite farmer in 1886, was preserved by the plain communities for 139 years, and is now sitting in your hands, ready to build. The plans, in their cleanest modern form, have been collected and printed in small Anabaptist publications and farm newsletters that almost never reach the general public, but the principle is now yours. And once you build the first one, you will understand something the utilities have been hiding from you your entire adult life. You were never a customer, you were a captive. You walked into this video paying somebody else for the right to be warm in your own house. You are walking out of it knowing that a Pennsylvania farmer in 1886 already solved that problem, that the Amish have been quietly using the solution for over a century, and that you can build a working version this weekend for the cost of a tank of gas and a handful of hardware store receipts. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of knowledge that changes the way a man looks at his own home, his own bills, and the systems that have been quietly draining him since the day he signed his first mortgage. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect somebody else's profit, then you already understand why this channel exists. The Amish did not preserve this for me. They did not preserve it for you. They preserved it for themselves, because they knew that every generation has to relearn what the last generation almost forgot. We are just lucky enough to be standing close enough to listen. Here is what I want from you. Down in the comments, tell me one thing. Tell me whether your home was built before 1980, and tell me which wall in your house faces south. Just those two pieces of information, because if you tell me, I can tell you in a reply whether you should start with a warm wall, a deep sink, or a Burkholder reservoir. I read the comments on every video, and I write back to as many as I can. Do not be shy. Do not assume somebody else will ask first. The men who get the most out of this channel are the men who actually leave a comment. And if you want to keep walking down this road with me, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. This is not about supporting a creator. This is about joining a quiet movement of men, mostly older, mostly skeptical, mostly tired of being lied to, who are recovering the knowledge that was taken from our fathers and grandfathers. Next week, I am going to walk you through a specific Amish technique for keeping food cold for 90 days without electricity, using nothing but a hole in the ground and a material almost every American home already throws away. There is a date on that one too, going back to 1834, and I think it is going to surprise you even more than this one did. Until then, take a walk through your own house tonight. Touch the south-facing wall. Stand in the basement. Look at the mass that is already there, sitting silent, waiting. The Amish taught me that a house is not a set of bills, a house is a battery. You just have to learn how to charge it. I will see you in the next one.